Well, before the month of October is over, who's ready for a story of vampires? Sorry. Hemivores. Classic Doctor Who review time, and we are talking about The Curse of Fenric. My apologies if I slur at any point. I am filming this after having done my bi-weekly live stream, and the hydrating beverage that I granted myself was stronger than I had anticipated. But we're going to do this all the same. It'll be fine. This is a story that not only have I seen it before, I've actually talked about it before, just not on channel. There was a brief period of about 6 months where I was actually doing the classic Doctor Who reviews on the Council of Geeks podcast. Yes, the same one that has since played host to various things that I have hosted with Jesse Gender. But for a brief period of time, I was doing Council of Geeks classic Doctor Who reviews on that feed. And this was one of them. But it didn't have a video review, so here we are. Now, this time watching it, I did watch the special edition, the extended version that has about 12 minutes added into it. And unfortunately, when I watched the original version of this for my previous review, it was long enough ago that I couldn't tell you what's new. I didn't have it memorized well enough to be able to definitively say, oh, okay, I know what the new stuff in here is. That having been said, I'm going to go out on a limb and say that this is better, if only because there was one specific issue that is here, but I'm going to suspect was a lot worse in the aired version that I probably saw before. And that has to do with pacing. A rather recurrent issue with Sylvester McCoy's era is the pacing and things feeling rushed. Not in a we're speeding through the scene way, like any given individual scene is still paced pretty well, but often feeling like we have skipped a scene somewhere in between, like there's a connective tissue missing. And like the best example I can come up with that here is relatively early on where like there's a scene with this sort of disabled professor, and he's in this sort of hidden catacomb sort of place in this church, trying to decipher these Viking runes, and then like 2 scenes later, he's in a military commander's office arguing with him. And it feels like we're missing like the connective tissue between those 2 scenes. And it isn't like there's a ton of time in between for much stuff to have happened. That kind of thing happens a little bit here. It happens fairly regularly in McCoy's era. I think Ghostlight is the quintessential example of feeling like you are missing scenes to connect parts of this. But having said that, while there is a little bit of that here, to my memory, it was worse in the version I saw before, which would make sense because that version was shorter. So I have a pretty strong feeling that that is a problem more or less mitigated, at least partially, by the extended length that we have here. There is one random scene that's very odd because we basically have the same scene twice in alternate versions where a possessed character orders the I guess turned into Hemivores sort of vampire-esque minions to go and fetch the Ancient One. And we basically see what is effectively, at least in terms of what's communicated, the same scene twice. Not back to back. There's like a scene in between, but he says, go fetch the Ancient One, and we see it twice. That's odd. That feels like an accident that happens from just cramming in every single cutscene and not realizing one of the cutscenes was actually an alternate scene that you already have another version of. Random bit of weirdness, though. So I haven't really talked about story. So this is 7th Doctor and Ace. I love 7th Doctor and Ace. That like 7th Doctor is my favorite classic Doctor. 7th Doctor and Ace is one of my favorite Doctor companion pairings because I do very sincerely think it is a separate discussion of who is your favorite Doctor and who is your favorite Doctor and companion pairing, because you can think a Doctor is really good on their own, regardless of who the companion is, or you could think a Doctor only really works with a certain kind of companion. I feel that second way with the 6th Doctor. I think part of why his TV adventures didn't work is they didn't really find a good companion to pair him off with. But you listen to some of his Big Finish stuff, especially when he had Evelyn Smythe as his companion. Oh, they play so well off each other. It's amazing. Sometimes the pairing is more than just these are two characters that I like individually. Sometimes it is about the dynamic. And the Doctor and Ace have an amazing dynamic. And you can also tell how much these two actors really just like being with each other. You can feel the bleed over of their actual in-person rapport into the characters, and it fits so well, so nicely. Also, some interesting stuff happens with Ace in here. There's some kind of twist reveal stuff that kind of ties into her background and her history and her relationship with her mother. It's fine. I think it suffers a little bit from the problem that most of the stuff regarding Ace and her childhood and growing up, and this isn't specifically restricted to this story, across the entire series, it's been a very show don't tell issue overall. It's a thing she brings up intermittently. And like, you can make stuff work in a show don't tell way if you really devote the time to a character, really digging into it. Sort of my go-to example is something like Quint's monologue in the first Jaws movie, where he's talking about the sinking of the USS Indianapolis. Like, they could have cut in like a visual representation of what he was saying, but it was so much more powerful just to hear him say it. But you kind of have to take the time to let the character tell their story. And we don't really get that with Ace and her childhood or her family background. We get it in tiny little bits and pieces, which doesn't really sell it. So there is that, and it's there, and it's fine. It's not especially obtrusive. It's less obtrusive now, coming back to it, because this was one of the earliest, the very first, because I think this is my third time watching this. The very first time I saw Curse of Fenric, I think that threw me off more because I just had no basis for understanding what the heck was going on. I think it plays best for me now because I have seen the snippets, most of the snippets and nuggets that are spread out across the Seventh Doctor's era, where we get the little hints of Ace and her issues with her mother and growing up and whatnot, but it's still not great because they are just kind of little nuggets. And this is trying to pay off, it's trying to pay off a breadcrumb trail, and there just isn't enough meat there to really do it. Mixing metaphors, bread, meat. I'm going to blame the sake that I was drinking. But there is some interesting stuff done with Ace because, in particular, there's some pretty significant plot points that pivot on her being not just clever, but book smart. Like knowing logic problems, knowing how to figure out, how to identify and then figure out a logical computing problem. And what's nice about that is so often the dichotomy of street smarts versus book smarts is really made an either or. Like, if you're street smart and rough and tumble and know how to handle yourself, you're not book smart. And if you're book smart, well, you have no common sense at all. And this kind of refutes that, because we've obviously been seeing, and even in this story, seeing Ace be very good at the ground level, rough and tumble. She can take care of herself, but also, like, she has a brain. She's not stupid. She's quite smart, actually. She probably doesn't have the education background in a lot of stuff, but she understands this. And it's kind of nice to see. There's also a surprising amount of nuance given to the Russian characters who show up, because this is a period piece kind of set at the tail end of World War II, at the point at which a lot of the Western powers, such as the US and the UK, yes, they're still focused on defeating Germany, but they also know that on the other side of this war, if they win, their current allies, those being the Russians, are not going to be their allies on the other side of this conflict. And both sides of that are kind of prepping and gearing for what to do when they no longer have a common enemy. And the Russian characters, especially given the fact that this was made while the Cold War was still very much an ongoing thing, this has a surprising amount of nuance and appreciation given to the Russian characters. There's this whole thing with the hemovores. Like I said, they're kind of analogous to vampires, at least in some ways, where like they are repelled by faith, by really strong faith in something. Not by just a symbol of a crucifix, but the faith that and the belief that you have in that. Which I don't know how far back that idea dates, like the separating the idea of just the object of a crucifix from the faith behind it. I'm sure it predates this. This is one of the earlier examples that I have seen where it really draws that distinction and makes a really strong point of it. But I really like that the captain of the Russian forces who are involved in this story has such faith in the revolution and the ideals of his nation that works to repel these these vampire-like creatures. That's neat. That's a neat idea. I like how they handled that. This has actually a pretty large supporting cast for Doctor Who, and pretty well handled as well. There's some real good performances here from the whole lot. This is a good cast, and we get pyrotechnics in this. I loves me when stuff blows up in Doctor Who, and Sylvester McCoy's era was real good for blowing stuff up. It's good stuff. I like it. It's funny. There was something that I remember bugging me a lot the previous two times I saw it, and didn't bother me nearly as much now. And I don't know how much of it was because I knew it was there, so it couldn't catch me off guard, and I've kind of already processed it. It's one of those things where yeah, I know this is here and I don't like it, so I don't get as hung up on it. Or if the way that this particular version is cut versus the original aired version, if it just feels like it has less emphasis on it, or maybe a little bit of both. And that is this idea that Fenric, the ultimate villain of this story, he fits a template that I don't like, which I'm going to call the puppet master or the mastermind villain. The one who everything is going to plan. I was behind all this stuff that happened, even multiple stories ago. That was me. I hate that. I hate that for a variety of reasons, kind of starting from the basis of it usually falls apart logistically very quickly. So many things happen that realistically you could not possibly have accounted for. And also it just feels like lazy writing a lot of the time. Better alternatives are either having a villain who is in truth a really good improviser, but they are able to hide the fact that they're scrambling. So from the outside looking in, it looks like they had it planned from the beginning, when in reality they are in fact just running themselves ragged, trying to make sure that the stuff that they hadn't counted on gets taken care of and put into place. Multiple versions of the Penguin have been good for that. Both Gotham and the Batman, the Colin Farrell version of Penguin, were good for that. The other alternative is the Xanatos Gambit from Gargoyles, where you have a villain who isn't 100% on top of everything, doesn't know what every outcome is going to be, but arranges things in such a way so it's okay, I don't know how this is going to go, but I've got myself positioned so nearly any outcome is still going to benefit me in some way. I win no matter what. That's so much better than just I always knew and I planned everything, blah, which Fenric does do a little bit, but as I said, there's way less emphasis put on it here than I remember there being. In my mind, it was a bigger deal and a bigger point. It feels a lot more minor here than I remember it being. I don't know if I'd actually kind of blown it up in my head as a bigger thing than it is because I dislike the trope so much. But that notion is kind of thrown out there, but it's gone pretty quick. I don't like the idea that Fenric was in some way responsible for the time storm that sent Ace, across the galaxy for the Doctor to run into, that they ultimately I don't like that notion, and it is still here, but it's pretty much done in passing. So I'm not. I guess I was just hung up on it because I dislike the trope so much, but no, it didn't deserve as much frustration as I had towards it historically. Not in this instance. It's here, I don't like it, but it's a pretty minor thing. I can move on. I can live. What's done with the Ancient One is also interesting. The idea of this creature that is both very old, but also from the future, and from a future that is just awful. And sort of what is done with that and the way that he factors into the ultimate defeat of Fenric is interesting, including this bit about the Doctor having to break Ace's faith in him. Something that Doctor Who has revisited since the God Complex with the Minotaur. 11th Doctor had to kind of do something similar with Amy. And I like that sort of in this one circumstance, in this one situation, the amount of faith and trust that the companion has in the doctor is actually a liability, and he has to play against that. And that is actually given proper emotional weight that he did that too. So I appreciated that as well. I think overall, I just came away with a much better appreciation for this story than I've had the previous times that I've watched it. It's got solid characters. It builds up pretty well. Its notions are interesting. I will say, like, another thing that I think I've come around on, there's this whole thing with like this chess problem where like the board's set up in a certain way and the doctor has kind of trapped Fenric in the, saying like there is one move that could end this and you have to figure it out. And like Fenric is just, whether it's a rule or it's just kind of the way he is, where like he can't stop himself from like getting sucked in, like I have to figure this out. And I think it's bothered me in the past that the answer to that is kind of BS. Like the answer is literally break the rules of chess. But at the same time, I think at this point, for how much I've come to appreciate the Seventh Doctor, that is very him, where the only solution is something that is kind of cheating. That's something he'd do. So, like, even that moment, which I remember not landing as well in the past, it kind of works for me now. I don't know if I don't know if it is a case of me finally seeing a superior version, or if it is a case of I needed to see this multiple times to get over my hangups and appreciate what is good about it. Because what's good about it is the atmosphere, the tension, the dynamic between the Doctor and Ace, and honestly, even Fenric and the build-up towards him and the complications and the issues with the characters that is going on, because there's plenty for them to deal with even before Fenric makes himself present and known, that it really all fits together in a way that is better than I remember. So whatever the cause of my lack of fully appreciating this in the past, I seem to have gotten over it, and I'm glad for that. Curse of Fenric. Have you seen this one? What did you think about it? Have you rewatched it lately? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments and let's talk about it. Patreon. I tried to roll the R again, and on Patreon it didn't quite work as well. Patreon pays the bills and enables me to do this as my living. And even if you can't help me out that way, like, share, subscribe. Those help as well. Don't worry too much about it, though. We take a relaxed attitude around here, so just come on back next time you need a break. Now to thank my highest supporting patrons: Robin Moore, Jared Boyce, Subin Lutfulla, Andicate 808, Mara G, Angry Casperl, Dave Hall, Movie Turtle, Oliver B, The Baba Duchess, Sean Miller, Welsh Wrestling Geeks, Melissa Pedersen, Mary Mello, Becky Sparks, Loki Eris, Tracy Scrabbit, Pau Baraba Joggle, and Sir Didymus is my favorite. I also want to give my thanks to all the supporters who didn't get named, because you are all indeed very nifty people. You could be a nifty person too if you go support me on Patreon, and there's the clause. Ugh.